Hello, my name is Marcy, and I am reading to you from the New Bedford Light. The first story is titled Burgo Wins Contentious Race for City Council Presidency. New Bedford. At large city councilor Shane Burgo won the council presidency Monday night, turning back an effort to defeat him that brought the ideological rancor more typical of national politics into a matter usually settled quietly by the council. The 7-4 roll call vote for Burgo against Ward 3 Councilor Sean Oliver ended a weeks long campaign by the new city police union leader and a conservative radio talk show host to characterize Burgo, one of the most progressive councilors, as an extremist and potential danger to the city. They claimed, and Burgo has denied, that he has publicly supported defunding the police and establishing safe injection sites to reduce harm for substance abusers. Burgo's election to a one-year position prompted a several-minute standing ovation from councilors and a crowd of some 70 people who filled the chamber's main levels and flowed into the balcony, some standing through the session for lack of seats. Now serving his second two-year council term, Burgo, 31, was escorted to the president's chair by Ward 4 Councilor Derek Baptiste and at-large Councilor Linda Murad. He delivered remarks, then presided for the rest of the 40-minute organizational meeting as outgoing President Naomi R.A. Carney, an at-large member, took her regular seat alongside her colleagues. Known for often citing New Bedford's Latin motto, Lucem Diffundo, meaning I diffuse light, Burgo invoked it again, calling it a promise to create hope. I will lead with the same light. We will work to make sure no one is left in the shadows. The council's second youngest member, who won the second highest vote among 5 at-large council candidates in 2003, pledged to work to have every resident feel seen, heard, and valued. Your council stands ready to serve you. His voice broke with emotion as he thanked his 3 older brothers who were in the chamber with their 92-year-old grandmother, Anna Barros, who raised them after they lost their parents when they were children. Every step I've taken is because of you, Burgo said to Barros, who watched from a wheelchair by the spectator seats. Thank you for the strength and the light that has always guided me forward. Presidential choice became a little more public than usual, is the quote. Oliver, one of the most conservative councilors who has served for just under 2 years, said he started taking stock of support among his fellow councilors in late October because he thought he could do the. After the vote, he said he and Burgo would continue the cordial relationship they've maintained through his time on the council, which began with a contested Ward 3 special election in February 2023 and continuing when he ran unopposed that November. Oliver acknowledged that the question of the council presidency this time, usually worked out among council members with little fanfare, became a little bit more public than usual. I think people are paying more attention to politics. The objections to Burgo, raised in an email by New Bedford Police Union head Officer Lorenzo Gonzalez and amplified by Chris McCarthy, a talk show host on WBSM radio, brought people out, he said, indicating the crowd in the chamber. In a 7-4 roll call, Oliver voted with the minority of Leo Choquette of Ward 1, who nominated Oliver, at-large councilor Ian Abreu, and Joe Lopez of Ward 5. On a second ceremonial vote for unanimous consent to show support for Burgo, Oliver and Choquette voted no. Abreu and Lopez joined the 7 councilors who had backed Burgo for election to make a 9-2 vote on unanimity. In votes for council president, it's traditional for members to take a second ceremonial vote to show the council coming together to support the new leader. Oliver said his vote against unanimity was nothing personal. He said he could not be true to myself and support that motion, as I didn't feel that's who I look to for a leader. In nominating Oliver, Choquette, who was elected in 2023, said he would trust Oliver to look for his own ward's interests. He said one of his main objections to Burgo is that he does not own property, does not pay city property taxes, and would not be as invested in the city as someone who does. I view this council as the city board of directors, Choquette said. The shareholder asked me to cast my vote for a property taxpayer. The motion for unanimity was made at large the motion for unanimity was made by at-large councillor Brian Gomes, the longest-serving member, who rose to support Burgo and to condemn the campaign to defeat him. Gomez, who has served on the council since 1991 with a 1-year hiatus, said, "I've never seen anything like I've seen over a council presidency." Without naming McCarthy or WBSM, Gomez decried the name-calling from the radio station and called the station's activities sick. An outspoken advocate for the police and opponent of safe injection or supervised injection sites, Gomez never mentioned the police union chief's role in opposing Burgo. He said, "Burgo is no threat to the city or public safety, and these characterizations of him are false." He said, "Burgo has raised controversial subjects for discussion, but it was his right to do so." Without saying he supported the notion of a city-authorized encampment for unhoused people, Burgo last year introduced a motion to the council to consider the possibility as a temporary measure to create safer conditions. Before that, Burgo, who heads the Council Committee on Housing and Homeless Affairs, backed an unsuccessful bid to hold a non-binding citywide referendum on some form of rent stabilization. In an interview Tuesday morning, Gonzalez, who was recently elected as police union president, congratulated Burgo. He said that while Burgo and he disagree on many issues, I wish him nothing but the best as council president. Gonzalez said he is ill with pneumonia and was having trouble speaking, but he said city police stand ready to help Burgo, and he declined to answer further questions. McCarthy, the radio host, said in a voice message early in the morning that the outcome did not surprise him. "Stupid is as stupid does, right?" McCarthy said in the message. "They'll have to answer to the voters who sent them emails and called them. They'll have to wear the Burgo brand on their backsides." In a brief interview while he was pressed to get on the air for his morning show, McCarthy said he could not quickly summarize his concerns about Burgo, as he'd been working on this issue for months. He said, while Burgo never uttered the words, "defund the police," he implied that the councillor had taken that position. Burgo has emphatically denied that. McCarthy focused on Burgo showing up 20 minutes into his colleague Tim Weisberg's 1-hour program Tuesday morning, and later on the air stressed that Burgo was late. "That's the best way to encapsulate my concern," he said in the interview. Former Mayor Scott Lang did not endorse the campaign against Burgo, but before the meeting, he questioned whether either candidate was right for the council presidency. He said the two stand too far on their side of the political spectrum. Burgo on the left, Oliver on the right. Before the vote on Monday, Lang said the council should find a consensus-type candidate better able to represent the council as a whole. Ward 6 councillor Ryan Pereira, the youngest city council member who, like Burgo, was first elected in 2021, rose at the meeting to praise Burgo for having the temperament and the knowledge of parliamentary rules to conduct meetings with poise and efficiency. Pereira praised Burgo's work on zoning reform, housing, and controlling spending, as well as balancing cooperation with Mayor John Mitchell and advocating for the council's role in city government. The president represents the council in regular meetings with the mayor, runs the bi-monthly council meetings, and appoints committee heads. More broadly, Burgos said he feels his job will be not to advance his own views, but to run the legislative process so councilors are able to properly represent the people who sent them here. The next story is titled, Fishermen May Not Like Offshore Wind, but Some Work for It. The subtitle says, Vineyard Wind has paid about $8 million to local fishermen and vessel owners for safety and security during construction. New Bedford. A fishing boat named Saints and Angels sat docked at Leonard's Wharf after a recent fishing trip. Ice covered some of the deck as a man cut into the boat's steel side to create a door for scientific buoy deployment. Nearby vessels were being worked on, some with anti-offshore wind flags whipping in the wind. Just the American flag flew on the Saints as Tony Alvernaz climbed up to the wheelhouse. The blue-hulled scalloper, built in 1997, started out as a tender boat, transporting loads of fish between vessels and processing facilities. After a few years catching tuna, the vessel brought in over 1 million pounds of scallops over its life. But times, regulations, and fish stocks have changed. The bivalves are still relatively lucrative, but vessels have spent more and more days sitting at the docks while expenses have risen. So, 2 years ago, Alvernaz, the part owner of 6 scallopers, put aside his personal feelings and did something he never thought he'd do. He signed up to work for an offshore wind company. In about 2 years, Vineyard Wind has paid about $8 million to local fishermen and vessel owners, many from New Bedford, like Alvernaz, to provide safety and security during the wind farm's construction, a figure that includes fuel costs. About 45 fishing boats have worked as safety vessels, guard vessels, science vessels, and scout vessels on the project, which remains under construction 15 miles south of Martha's Vineyard. This could mean sitting at a site 24/7, guarding scour protection before the monopiles go in, identifying and transmitting locations of fishing gear to be avoided, or moving through the wind area looking out for and alerting other vessels of activity. It's an example of collaboration and coexistence amid what has been a contentious relationship between the two industries. The dispute dates back a decade to when offshore wind projects were first proposed on the East Coast, and tensions have remained quite high since. This fall, in one waterfront kerfuffle, while top state officials celebrated a new terminal to support offshore wind among other uses, a New Bedford police officer asked a captain to take down the anti-offshore wind flag on his vessel. Outside, a separate group protested offshore wind. Fishermen hold legitimate concerns. Offshore wind projects may impact fish ecosystems, fishing operations, and long-standing federal fisheries surveys that inform quotas set each year. Because conflict can't be avoided, wind companies earmark millions of dollars to compensate fishermen for lost days at sea, damaged or lost gear, loss of fishing grounds, and increased fuel costs to transit around the wind farms. Vineyard Wind established a $19 million fund for Massachusetts fishermen, which is separate from the safety vessel contracts. Alvernaz, 62, said vessels get $6,000 a day from Vineyard Wind for the safety work, far less than the $20,000 to $30,000 that he estimates a scalloper could earn from fishing on good days. But $6,000 is also better than $0 sitting at the dock, and his crew gets paid. 4 of Alvernaz's vessels are enrolled in the program. Together, they've done about 40 days of work at the Vineyard Wind Project or around it. They've captured foam debris following the blade failure in July, following the flotsam to Newport, Rhode Island, and Montauk, New York. While a salvage company retrieved the blade pieces from the ocean bottom this fall, Alvernez kept an eye out for any debris that broke off. But before taking their first trip for Vineyard Wind, the fishermen had to check several boxes: drug tests, safety training, and classes and exams to earn or renew licenses. They put in the time to meet those standards without a guarantee of a job opportunity. Vineyard Wind pays for or reimburses the fishermen for the above, as well as the boat inspections and more, to prepare the captains and their vessels. And there are no strings attached. It's not like you have to work for Vineyard Wind. They're still going to help you put all this stuff together, and you can work for someone else, said John Verasimo, a former fisherman and now consultant for Vineyard Wind, who describes himself as a bridge between the wind company and waterfront. Vineyard Wind has put about 175 fishermen through classes for licenses or safety training, but not all of them have gone on to work for the company. The fishing boats may also require vessel upgrades, which happen on Vineyard Wind's dime. Some vessels don't have AIS, a system that transmits the boat's location to other vessels. Others have a Class B system. To work on the wind farm, though, vessels need a Class A, which costs about $2,000 to $3,500. In November, Vineyard Wind paid for installation on 4 vessels in New Bedford, 3 scallopers and 1 clammer. It cost the company another $1,500 to $2,000 per vessel for installation labor. Dave Frank, owner and manager of Fairhavens-based Chris Electronics, estimates his business has outfitted 25 to 30 local vessels for Vineyard Wind. He's done electrical work on the Foss tugs, which lead the barges to and from the wind farms with the major turbine components. It's definitely not the same money as they'd make fishing, but it's better than sitting at the dock, Frank said. The boats need a leg up, said Verasimo. It might not be a lot, but it makes a difference to these guys. Some of the guys, it makes a big difference. The Light asked Alvernez how he thinks he'd be doing without this extra work from Vineyard Wind. I don't even want to imagine, he said. Alvernez shows an appreciation for the engineering behind this massive infrastructure project. He shares photos he's taken offshore of the giant jack-up vessel that installs the components. He recounts watching a remote operating vehicle with arms retrieve pieces of the broken blade from the ocean bottom. He praises how Vineyard Wind has dealt with him, but he also forcefully criticizes offshore wind as an industry, as well as the federal government that has greenlit it. He disagrees with where the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, has cited several wind farms, some which will overlap with important scallop grounds. The ocean has many stakeholders, and when drawing out the lease areas, regulators must account for conflicts between those interests. They use computer models to try to deconflict the competing interests and find solutions. In some cases, they avoid a fishery. In other cases, they allow construction and fishing grounds. BOEM, this administration, sucks eggs. Just lease the whole ocean, Alvernez said. Why don't you come out to the fishing industry and say, look, where can we put these? And though he casts aspersions on offshore wind, he also gets criticism from its opponents, fellow fishermen. I'm out there doing security, and I get, "Yeah, traitor," over the radio, Alvernez said. I get on the radio and I say, "Come back, ya mama," what? You have to do things that's uncomfortable sometimes, said Mike Quinn, president of Shoreline Offshore, discussing the criticisms and concerns from the fishing industry. Somebody's got to do it. It might as well be fishermen. He added that he thinks they are overqualified for some of the offshore work. Quinn and his family own a sizable fleet of 12 scallopers, some of which are part of Vineyard Wind's safety vessel program. He said he wanted a seat at the table when offshore wind started to be seriously discussed, and now sits at several, including on the board of the New Bedford Ocean Cluster. He would not say how much he and his family's companies have earned from the working on the wind project, but he confirmed their businesses had invested millions to help support the nascent industry, including the recent loss of a New Bedford-built barge to provide offshore docking for offshore wind vessels. Offshore wind is backed by the government. There's nothing I can do complaining about it, Quinn said. I would rather have a seat at the table and provide jobs to local people. In addition to providing more work for fishing crews, the project has allowed some older members to continue working on the boats. It's easier on the body than fishing, Quinn said. Frank, like Alvernez, put aside his personal views of offshore wind. He doesn't think it's a good idea, but I can't run a business that way. He estimates offshore wind accounts for just under 10% of his revenue, which helps during their slow season. About 2 years ago, Krista Bank, fisheries manager for Vineyard Offshore, brought together several fishing vessel owners, including Alvernez and Quinn. She didn't yet have money budgeted to contract them, but she wanted them to name their price, one which they'd all have to agree on to conduct safety work during the project's years-long construction phase. It wasn't in Vineyard Wind's original construction plan or budget, but Bank said she quickly saw the need and made the case for it internally. Bank already had a reputation on the New Bedford waterfront. She'd worked for years at the local marine science school as a fisheries biologist, sometimes conducting research on fishing boats, but it took time to build trust, especially as she now represented a wind company. She continues to have an important rapport with fishermen, a stock that doesn't mince words. I had it out with Krista, Alvernez said. They were sitting at the dock, I don't know how many years ago, talking about wind, and I was like, how dare you? Bank was expecting this. I started to work with some local fishermen, and some of the fishermen I also knew from my previous work, and they'd be like, I can't believe you're working for offshore wind, Bank told the Light. And I said, well, would you rather have somebody like me in this role that understands the challenges you've already been through, or someone that has no idea? She joined the project in part because she wanted to ensure they did not get left behind. We are not their first challenge, Bank said. They've been dealing with challenges for a long time, and having the developers understand that might make them realize why the resistance to this. As business people, what's your risk? We always talk about risk in the offshore wind world. Well, for fishermen offshore, wind is a risk because it can potentially change the habitat. They're the ones that will be out there fishing next to us, and I want to work well with them, and I'm hoping we can both benefit from this, she said. Bank established direct contracts with the local captains, no middlemen who could skim some of the payment and make communications more difficult. It's a very personal working relationship, Alvernez said, praising Bank and her team. She is fair. She wins us some battles. Bank also aimed to build a program that would keep the fishermen fishing. The model that was out there is the opposite of the approach I've taken, Bank said. I do not want to take fishermen away from fishing. I do not want to take a fishing vessel and turn it into an offshore wind vessel. And that model is in Europe. You have fishing vessels that are support vessels for offshore wind, but they don't really. Her program to date seems a success. Bank said she has received more than 200 applications from fishing vessels, some recreational or from other states, to contract with the company. She's worked with about 45 for safety work, a figure that includes fishing vessels that have helped during the pre-construction phase with data collection. There's people on that list, we'll put it in this way, that are publicly, vehemently against offshore wind, she said. But if I have a job I can use, I will go back to them. She stressed she does not hold their personal views about offshore wind against them. There's more demand than work opportunities, so she connects vessels with other contractors working on the project if she has no jobs. She has also seen project subcontractors hire local fishing boats directly without her involvement, including for work on buoy deployment or inter-array cable installation. To encourage local hiring, her team created a database of interested fishing vessels that it shares with organizations and contractors. They're building it out to include basic vessel specs and information, if, for example, the boat has done buoy deployment or offshore wind safety work, or if it's equipped with an A-frame. She shared anecdotes of advocating for fishermen to the foreign and big companies Vineyard Wind works with, who often prefer other big companies to contract with, and dispelling stereotypes and misconceptions they held about New Bedford's storied fishing fleet. She recalled one instance in which a company was having trouble retrieving a weather buoy. They connected with Alvernez, who had no issues completing the retrieval. In sharing this, she says she hopes the wind industry and its contractors see the values the local fishing fleets can offer. Alvernez would like to see South Coast Wind, a project set to occupy the Marine Commerce Terminal after Vineyard Wind finishes construction, follow its predecessor's model. Alvernez recently met with the company. In response to an interview request, Sam Askey, South Coast Wind's fisheries manager, confirmed that the company is engaged with fishermen about working with their vessels during the construction and operations. We recently held a listening session in New Bedford to gather insight from local fishing vessels owners/operators who have experience supporting offshore wind development, and to learn about the many roles fishermen currently fill and could potentially take on in future projects. Askey said in an email statement. My hat's off to South Coast Wind, Alvernez said. If anything, Vineyard Wind was like the prototype of what worked and what didn't, so they're actually going to benefit from that. Some developers use a third party to employ fishermen, as it's easier to contract with one company, which would then contract with multiple vessels that could be local or not. But Bank emphasized the importance of wind developers contracting directly with local vessels. For Vineyard Offshore's planned project in New York, for example, she is hiring a vessel out of Brooklyn. Alvernez credits the wind company with opening doors to other contracts after it gave him a job for buoy. He intends to expand his non-fishing work as his boats spend fewer than 40 days fishing per year. In recent years, he's helped with research trips for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and NOAA Fisheries, and plans to add a crane to the Saints and Angels to make it more research-friendly. Offshore wind is just the latest work that keeps his engines running. A boat is like a plane, Alvernez said. A plane you have to fly. His other vessel, Chatham, eased into port in mid-December, returning from a trip off Massachusetts with 12,000 pounds of scallops on ice below deck. This month, one of his vessels will head back to Vineyard Wind for more security work. He hasn't picked which one he's sending yet. I'm a businessman. I sure as hell can't stop offshore wind, he said. One of my captains said, I don't have to like you or to take your money. One hand washes the other. And this story was written by Anastasia E. Lennon.